Hello, welcome back to the vlog. I hope you're well, I hope you're on good form. Before I start, please do like and subscribe and put the little notification bell on so you know when I have uploaded a video, because it will be quite sporadic. I am trying to squeeze this into my working week. I don't really have time to do it, so it could be every other week, but I am going to try and start doing an install of the week with one of our partners or our in-house installation teams, where I'll go and interview the installer, the homeowner, and have a quick look at the installation. So I'll try and be regular with that. There'll be short videos, and then I'll try and do a more substantial video every other week probably. And as you've seen, today's video is aiming, well, it's about how we're going to achieve the 600,000 heat pump installs per year by 2028. Massive challenge. So I'm going to give you my view on it as an individual, my view as an MCS installer. I work for a manufacturer, so I'll give a manufacturer's standpoint. I'll give my opinion on policy, and then I'll also talk about from a homeowner standpoint as well, because obviously I'm with homeowners every day. You know, I'll meet at least 10 individual homeowners a week, and I get their views as well. So some that'll end up having a heat pump, some that'll end up not having a heat pump, some that have had a heat pump for free. So I've got quite a broad spectrum there of homeowners as well as installers. So we do supply MCS installers as a company. So we've got their opinion as well as I've got lots of friends and colleagues in the industry, gas engineers, oil engineers. My brother has a company, Plumbing Lancashire, and he employs over 12 people, 12 installers. And so I can give you quite a broad view on the market in its entirety, from start to finish, like I say, from government policy all the way through to the end users and everyone in between. So that's what I'm going to try and cover in this video, as well as we're going to visit, which I'm excited about, our 4th training setup in the UK. So we've got a training facility in Wharton, which is just up the road from our main production facility in Lytham, that we run a course at every month. We have got a gas training centre in Walsall in Birmingham that we partner with, and we've got a training rig there. We've got a training rig with a gas training centre in Hull, and we are open number 4, which is in North Shields, which is just east of Newcastle, and that's with Ignite Gas Training. And I'm going to head across there. I've got a couple of guys there doing the install on the training rig as we speak, and I'm going to go and get it all up and running and show you what it's all about, and what we're doing as a manufacturer to support this industry, because I think that's key. As a manufacturer, we should support you guys, the installers, and the homeowners as well. So that's our responsibility. So I'll show you what we're doing on that. Any questions, as always, fire them into the comments below. I will link Global Energy's email for the training, so you can contact them if you want training. I will link Ignite Gas Training and the Walsall Gas Training Centre and the Hull Training Centre all below. Yeah, so come along today and let's see what the crack is. Right, so the format of this video is going to be different sections on the rollout of heat pumps over the years, and to achieve this 600,000 installs by 2028. And I thought this first section, I'd talk about the heat pump market up to now. So I can only talk about my experience, which, as I've said in other videos, is 18 years of heat pump installations. So it was 18 years ago, just over 18 years ago, that I installed my first heat pump. So I thought I'd cover it all the way from that day, the different policy changes that have come in, the way that the market felt to an installer like me, you know, the word on the street, as it were, the different funding mechanisms that have been in place, all the way to today. So that's what the first section is going to be about. So as I've just stated, and I've said before, my first heat pump was installed 18 years ago. It was a Viessmann ground source heat pump, and it was on a new build property, a very large property that was, I think it was in the region of 400 square metres, maybe a touch more. It's probably closer to 450. And then there was a 50 square metre pool house as well. So it was a really nice, large detached house with a basement. It had a separate pool house with changing rooms and an outdoor pool as well. So it was drawn up by an M&E consultant, that job, in partnership with the architect. And like I say, it was a ground source heat pump. Great piece of kit. I've always liked Viessmann kit. You know, they manufacture stuff really well. The boilers are good. People struggle with the controls, but it's like any control and any wiring system. The first time you see it, it's frightening. But when you get your head into gear with it, you can see the functionality on it. So it was pretty cool. And like I say, 18 years ago, pardon the pun, it was groundbreaking. So yeah, that was my first introduction to heat pumps, and I didn't know a right lot about them back then. I was just and I'm gonna talk about my first boss as well, because it just so happens that the 13th of October, when most of this video is filmed, is the anniversary of his death. So my first boss, Barry, who absolute superstar, and I'm going to dedicate a whole section to this video on him, because it is appropriate to the rollout of heat pumps and how we achieve it, having people from the industry like him. But anyway, cut back to the story. 18 years ago, my first boss that I was working for at the time, we were delivering this project, and we didn't know a right lot about heat pumps. However, Barry knew a lot about heating, you know, hydraulics, pump side, all the stuff that you should know as a heating engineer. He was a clever bloke. So we quickly got to grips with it. Funnily enough, like I've said in my last video, the buffer tank video, when we were talking about open loop and whatnot, that whole house was open loop. It had underfloor heating throughout. We removed, and there was another heating engineer involved that was to do with Viessmann. And I remember we installed the underfloor heating to a low temperature design. It was underfloor heating throughout the house. The towel rails were on a separate circuit, but they were supplemented with direct electric, so they could have it warm when they wanted them warm. But the entire house was fed on low temperature. I think the design temperature was in the region of 35 degrees at design set point. And I remember we ordered the underfloor heating kit, and it got delivered on site. And I remember us looking at the blending valves and Barry saying, and it was quite abrupt, was Barry, you know, understated. And I don't want to swear on my vlog, but he said something in the region of, why the flip do we need blending valves? And at the time I was like, oh, well, you know, blend the water down. But he said, no, because we're going low temperature anyway. Surely they're not required, and the pump kits aren't required. And like I said, there's an M&E consultant involved in this that drew it all up, and we're just spanner turners on the ground. And so we questioned him about it, and we had a good discussion, and yeah, ultimately we got rid of them all. So we stripped out all of the pumps, the circulating pumps on the manifolds, all the blending valves, and we sized a single circulation pump in the plant room. It was a big Grundfos. I can't remember, they weren't branded as a Magna back then. I can't remember what it was called, but it was a big A-rated modulating pump. To do the whole house. There's one pump on that house. I think there is, like I say, it's a long time ago, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There'll be either 5 or 6 manifolds throughout the house. No pumps on them. Underground pipe for about 3 meters from the house to the plant room. And then, yeah, a honking big pump on there is a distribution pump. Big buffer tank, balanced buffer tank, I will note. And yeah, that was it. That was my introduction to it. That was the first job that I did, and that was kicked off heat pumps for me. So I can talk about the heat pump rollout from that point. So we delivered that project, and it worked really well. Customer was happy. There was a few, don't get me wrong, there was some serious teething issues because it was a big system. We were new to heat pumps, and we had to you know, revisit, rebalance, reset up, get used to it, adjust the weather comp curve, get used to the Viessmann controller, because you've got to bear in mind we're doing underfloor heating, hot water, and a pool off this as well. And it was hybrid. There was an LPG boiler, but that was purely for hot water top up, and when there was a huge demand on the pool, because external pool, and he wanted to use it in winter. So from time to time, there was a big demand on the pool. Anyway, I could talk about that job for about 4 hours, as you probably realised. So that was day one of heat pumps for me. It took, I would say, probably a year or two after that before I installed my second heat pump. But the market back then was purely really high-end homes. I don't even think social housing had really got to grips with it at that point. It was just the people that could afford it and were keen for it, because the fuel saving, because I don't know, actually, to be fair, 18 years ago LPG and oil was quite expensive compared to gas and electricity, because electric was probably down at 8 pence a kilowatt hour. So yeah, so I suppose there was quite a big saving compared to off-grid technologies. But at the end of the day, that project, I mean, just the plant room alone and the ground source kit and the collectors were probably in the region of 25 grand, and that's 18 years ago. So you're probably looking closer to 40 grand these days. So that gives you an idea of the kind of people that were having heat pumps back then. Roll forward 3 or 4 years when I started to really get into heat pumps. There was no MCS had come about, so they'd set up, and all products that were eligible for grants. So the main thing then was your solar PV and the feed-in tariff for solar PV. So that's what the main driver behind MCS being registered for installation and manufacture back then was to get the feed-in tariff for solar panels. There was nothing for heat pumps at that point, although you could register as an MCS heat pump and as an MCS installation. The first thing that came in was the RHPP, right? A lot of you'll know the RHI, which was the Renewable Heat Incentive. They had something before that called the RHPP, which was the Renewable Heat Prepayment. And what they do on an air source heat pump would give you £750 up front, but it would come off your RHI when RHI came in. So whatever you were due on RHI, let's say it was £10,000 over 7 years, they would take that £750 off that. So we had a couple of years of that whilst we were trying to get RHI into gear. VAT was at 5% at that point on heat pumps, on low carbon technologies. So there was a bit of a saving there. But the market again was still your grand design style homes. Social housing had started to get on board with it, and there was a lot of projects done back then for social housing, but they were mainly test cases to see how they got on with it. There was a lot of really poor systems went in over a short period of time. There was negative press on it. We did some projects back then in Buxton and Gisborne and areas around us, and quite proud to say that I'd say 95% of those systems are still operational today. So yeah, it was a bit of a success story for us. That was like our first big project. You know, we were rolling out 20-30 heat pumps on properties, all off grid. So it was like old mining towns that people were still using coal to heat the houses. We put a full central heating system in off an air source heat pump. So we were always going to win, really. And yeah, it worked really well. And the other thing that we were doing was we were removing oil boilers and LPG boilers, because between 10 and 15 years ago, if you can remember, oil and LPG was quite expensive, and electricity again was still quite reasonable. It was 8-9 pence a kilowatt hour for electricity, which we were obviously dividing that by 3, because at the time you were looking at an average SCOP of about 3 if you did a good install. Just over if you did an awesome install, 3.5 sort of thing. But with the older heat pumps, that's what you were looking at. So we were delivering a kilowatt hour of heat for in the region of 2 to 3 pence, whereas oil was expensive. If you can remember, it was 10 to 15 years ago, it was up where it is now. Oil's actually quite cheap now compared to inflation. If you think about it, we're paying £1.30 a litre for diesel in our cars at the minute, and again 10 to 15 years ago at the peaks it was around £1.30 a litre. So we did all right taking oil and LPG boilers out and fitting heat pumps. We were doing nothing on the gas grid, apart from your odd house in London that it had a planning stipulation on it where they had to meet higher than usual carbon targets, and so we did a bit of that. But like I say, I'd say 90% of our work was split between removing oil and LPG boilers off, and the other 10% was new builds or social housing. There was nothing on the gas grid. We weren't taking gas boilers out because gas was 3p a kilowatt, electric was 9p a kilowatt, and obviously you all know how much a heat pump install is. So that went on until the RHI really kicked off. When the RHI really kicked off, the renewable heat incentive, it did accelerate things a fair chunk, because the payback was reduced. The payback on your capital cost was reduced because it was quite a good number, the RHI. It was more than the boiler upgrade scheme. Boiler upgrade scheme is currently £7,500. If you were, the RHI was based on how much heat loss your house had or how much renewable heat you generated. So most people were getting in the region of £10,000, and it was index linked. But the way RHI worked was you got paid in reverse. So you put the capital up front, you had the installation, you registered for RHI, and you got a quarterly payment in arrears. So the first quarter after your install, you'd get a payment, and it was spread over 7 years on the domestic scheme. So again, people had to have the cash to start with. But the payback, the amount of money you got was greater. So people, I call it the grey pound, not to be offensive, but it's people that have maybe had a final salary pension, a lump sum, they've got a bit of money about them, and they're looking at upgrading the heating system for, the next 20 years of their life. So we did a lot of that. The other bonus with RHI was hybrid systems were allowed on it. So let's say, for instance, you had a really big 200-year-old farmhouse that you needed to heat. Your pipework was not necessarily best suited to a low temperature system. You had a working functional oil boiler that was reasonably efficient. What we could do is tie a heat pump in, upgrade a portion of your radiators to suit, and give you a saving against your oil for a good chunk of the running time during the season. But you had that backup of the hybrid, i.e. the oil boiler, to almost guarantee you were warm when you got below design set point. So at the moment, we obviously designed to a certain outdoor conditions. Most of the time it's in the region of -3 outdoor temperature. But back then we could sort of choose. We could say, well, one heat pump will get you down to 0 degrees. Below that, we can rely on your oil. You can still get your RHI, so you get your payment back. You get your capital cost back, and you're reducing your carbon emissions massively. So it's really good. It worked really well, and we did loads of hybrid back then. And then when RHI ended, and the boiler upgrade scheme was introduced, they didn't allow hybrids. So that sort of stopped. Apart from commercial, we've not really done many hybrid systems, because as soon as you retain your gas or oil boiler or install one in conjunction with your heat pump, there's no funding for it as it stands. So yeah, that was where we were at really. So it wasn't a mass rollout as such, but we were installing systems and doing all right on the RHI. Then the RHI ended and was replaced with the boiler upgrade scheme, which I'm sure you're all aware of, and I'll discuss that in a minute, because about 10 people have tried calling me. So it is the next day now, and I left you yesterday with me getting bombarded by phone calls, and that just gives you an example of what it's like trying to manage the heat pump rollout. It ain't easy. All you MCS installers will know what I'm talking about, and most MCS installers are doing, on average, if you look at the figures, in the region of 5 heat pumps a year, and we're obviously doing double that a week. So it's it keeps you busy. So when I left you, I was just going to go on to the boiler upgrade scheme. So RHI was coming to an end And like I say, it did accelerate things a fair chunk. It wasn't crazy busy. It was still mainly the specific properties that I mentioned, the larger properties, the off-grid properties. We had started doing a few on-grid properties, but not as many as what we do now, because of the boiler upgrade scheme. But we've obviously had massive shifts in things, you know, that the financial situation, the mass inflation that we've had since COVID has really shifted gear with things in our game, in the building industry in general. Obviously 2020, 2021, it went crazy busy. Everybody just decided to do the houses up, and obviously when you do your house up, your heating system does come into question, and the boiler upgrade scheme's there. Boilers are being taken out because they're putting an extension on, or a boiler's coming to end of life, and getting a heat pump is now more of a viable option because of that £7,500 that is up for grabs on the boiler upgrade scheme, and the zero VAT, and the change in energy costs. Now, the spark gap is still there, and what we mean by the spark gap is the price of electricity to gas. So electricity is roughly 3.5 times the price of natural gas delivered at your home. So that means that we have got to get a 350% efficiency from our heat pump to break even with a natural gas boiler on run costs. We're always going to save carbon, which is important for many people, but obviously run costs have got to be there or better for most people to make the switch. So like I say, we're fast forwarding to 2020, to today, where we're at today with the boiler upgrade scheme, and what I've seen is a massive shift on public opinion on heat pumps. They believe in the technology more. I always use the analogy that when you go to a wedding and you take your seat at the table, and you've got eight to 10 people at the table, the first question is, oh, well, what do you do? And 15 years ago, when they asked it, my wife used to say, why do you always say that? Because you're more than that. But I used to, I'm just a plumber. That's what I used to say. And then the questions used to come, oh, what kind of work do you do? And I say, oh, well, I fit heat pumps. And then it'd spark an interest. Well, what is a heat pump? That was the first question that used to come, and then I used to obviously have to do the whole spiel on what a heat pump was, explain what it was, and people were interested. And then maybe 5 or 10 years after that, when public opinion was, people were more aware of heat pumps, when I used to say it, you had half the table would say, oh, they don't work. That was the first thing they used to say, heat pumps don't work, which used to obviously wind me up, because I had a couple of thousand heat pumps under my belt by that point. And I thought, I wouldn't be in business, or we wouldn't be in business if they didn't work. But so that was the way it was. Whereas now, when you say the word heat pump, most people are aware of what they are, why we have them, and most people believe in them, which is great. It's great. It makes our life easier. And the negative connotations that go with heat pumps have moved away. There's still, obviously, a chunk of society that don't believe in the technology. And ironically, I would say a fair chunk of them are building professionals, which is the embarrassing bit about it. I get involved in projects, and I'll have a lovely couple that's building the forever home, and they'll have a trusted builder and maybe a trusted plumber and a trusted electrician, and they're interested, the client is interested in a heat pump, and I find that myself and the client are on the same page, and our challenge is converting the building professional into installing the heat pump, because I think they're still scared that it's not going to work, and that I think it's a lack of education in the building industry. I think that's what it is, sadly. The British building standards haven't moved on for a good 40 years, whereas the rest of Europe has. We do work all over the UK, and Ireland as well. And it's a distinct difference in building standards in Scotland. They're ahead of us in England by a fair chunk. I'd say 10 years ahead. When I always say, when I go into a new build house in Scotland and you shut the front door, it almost makes the Audi sound, that, you know, that air tightness sound. Whereas sadly in England still, I'll walk into a new build house and you'll have a builder who says, well, we've insulated this thing to the hilt, and I'm looking around thinking, yeah, but that 300 mil of insulation you've put in isn't touching the rafters. You've left a 10 mil, a 10 or 20 mil gap. So it isn't what it says on paper. You know, people will get an EPC or a SAP report and it'll say X, Y, and Z, but in reality, the standard, because it's all about the way you install these technologies. That is the top and bottom of it. You know, you'll have a badge on the side of a heat pump that says it's got a seasonal coefficient of performance of 4.3 at 35 degree flow temp, but if it's not installed right, it won't achieve that. As well as if you get a big 8x4 sheet of Kingspan that says it's got a U value of whatever, if there's a gap round it, ain't gonna do it, is it? So that is almost where we're at today. I feel like the British public that read a little bit are aware of heat pumps and know they work and believe in it. Building professionals, and I'm not just talking about your one-man band builder. I'm talking about everyone from an M&E consultant who, sadly, for all the degrees they've got, overspec everything because it's always been the safe option. I remember some of the plant rooms we used to do, and there was 400 kilowatts of gas boiler in there, and the heat loss on the building was like 80, because it was just easy to put it in bigger. Oh, it'll be right, it'll work. So I think there is a lot of work to be done within the industry, and I'm not like, I'm the same. I've had to self-educate over the last 20 years. And the rest of us, the rest of the building professionals, need to do that to take this last leap of into believing in, this mix of technologies that we need to achieve. I don't want to say it because I know there'll be millions of comments, but achieve net zero, and because I know there's obviously the flat earthers, the non-believers, and I get that. I'm not arguing with that. My view on what I do as a profession, reducing carbon, making people's houses comfortable for reasonable energy costs, is not just about net zero. It's about making the air fresher. If I've got a boiler flue that's kicking out various gases versus a heat pump that's kicking out nothing, and I know there'll be comments about electricity generation. We're getting greener and greener on that. At the end of the day, you drive around the British countryside, we've got wind turbines, we've got solar panels on most people's houses now, microgeneration as that's known. So if we're generating electricity from a green source, putting it in a heat pump, there's no nasty gases coming out, it's just better. Whatever you believe about net zero and climate change, fresher air is better. So yeah, that is my view on where we've come from to now. And my journey with it. The next section, I'm going to talk about what is restricting the rollout of heat pumps, which is the most sensitive subject. So we'll be on there next. So the $1 million question is, what is restricting the rollout of heat pumps in the UK? We know where we want to be. We know the stimulus that the government have put in place so far, RHI, boiler upgrade scheme, zero rated VAT, etc., etc. What's stopping everybody having a heat pump, or restricting it? If you read the papers, the things that they will say are skill shortage. They will say I don't know, really from a newspaper headline grabbing point of view, they will say things like, they only work in an insulated home, there's not enough people to install them, there's not enough equipment, or that customers are disappointed with the performance of the heat pump. So that's the negative connotations that the media portray. I'll give you the real, my opinion from a person that's in the trenches, getting these things out there, what is holding it up. So from a buyer's perspective, you've got, we can overcome any single property. We can put a heat pump in any house, whether it's a well-insulated new build all the way through to a castle in Scotland. And we've done everything across the board in between that. So we single glazed windows, castle in Scotland, heated with a heat pump, all the way down to a 1-bedroom new build flat that's passive, and everything in between. We can do it. And anyone says that you can't heat that type of houses are wrong, because it's 1 + 1 = 2. You know, if you've got a heat loss of 1 kilowatt and you put 1 kilowatt in, it'll heat it. Equally, if you've got a heat loss of 200 kilowatts and you put 200 kilowatts in, it'll heat it. The only argument is the fiscal side, the financial implications, or the capex day one, the capital expenditure day one on that property. If you're going to heat a castle in Scotland, you're looking at £300,000 or £400,000 of an install. Not everyone's going to pay that when you can fork out 20 grand for an oil installation. So we know that we can heat any house, and we know that there's fiscal arguments pro or, you know, it's literally you write down a proposal and you put it to the customer and they'll look at it and say yes or no, okay, based on the fiscal side. But the practical side, we can do it. So setting that aside, what's slowing down the heat pump rollout? Skill shortage, okay? So that's number one. Is there a skill shortage? I would say our industry, there is a skill shortage, and there has been for many years. When me and my brother did our apprenticeships, because there's 2 years between us and we both started at 16, so you know, on the grand scheme of things, there's not that much of a gap between us. There was a shortage of plumbers then, 20 odd years ago, 24, 25 years ago, and nothing's changed since. I remember Tony Blair's speech. I don't want to get political, but I am. Tony Blair's speech, education. And I remember being at school and the teachers, no disrespect to the teachers, but the teachers saying, if you don't get a degree, you will essentially be unemployable. And that's the message that I got, okay? And many people around me got, including my brother. It was fear factor. If you don't get a degree, you will not succeed in life. Now, the way that my brain works does not suit the standard education system. There was no way I was carrying on with further education. Hence why I got an apprenticeship. Hence why my brother got an apprenticeship. Hence why many friends around us got apprenticeships, but nowhere near enough people did. And we've done all right in life. We run businesses, we work for good companies, and it's been really good to us, this industry. And we didn't need a degree. What we did need is creative minds, hard work, and a bit of intuition about us to succeed. Yeah, we needed those skills, but the further education we didn't need. So number one on the list is the skills shortage, and yeah, our industry has a massive skill shortage. There's an untapped section of our industry that are not working in heat pumps, that have the skills required and don't have access to it, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But on the whole, as a generalisation, the average age of a heating engineer, I'm going to guess at it because it's around 56 years old, I believe. And somebody will correct me in the comments when they Google it. But you know, the average age of a heating engineer is getting on. But I would say it's the 65, you know, the 60 to 70 year old heating engineers they're the ones with the knowledge that goes hand in hand with heat pumps. And this is the irony of it. And this is where, I don't want to say policymakers, but people that are in charge of certain schemes that run the heat pump industry just don't get it. They do not understand how wrong they can be. They're saying that we need younger engineers to pick up the rollout of heat pumps, and we do, but without that older generation passing on their skills and getting involved, it's going to make it even harder. I struggle so much with engineers getting them up to speed. It's almost like there's not enough of us that half know what we're doing to pass the skills on to the number of new engineers we need. That's the challenge. And unfortunately, the way that MCS works at the minute, it alienates a big chunk of heating engineers that are perfectly capable of fitting heat pumps. And the reason is they're in the latter stages of their career, and to invest £5,000 plus into becoming MCS registered and to start to install heat pumps, it's not worth a headache for them, which I totally understand. However, we are missing our greatest assets in our industry to pass on the information to the next generation. Sadly, that is the sad part of it. People like my boss Barry, if he was still alive, like I said it earlier on in the video, this month, I got the date wrong. I said the 13th of October. It's the 23rd. I know it's the 23rd. I just said it wrong in the video. 23rd of October is the date of his anniversary of his death. If he was still alive, there's no way he would become MCS registered. And again, I'm not going to swear on the vlog, but he would said, what a load of twaddle. And I'm not against MCS. I am pro MCS in a lot of respects. I think that we should have a standard in our industry for us all to work towards achieving. Whatever I don't care what you call it, but it needs to be laid out for us so we know what standard to work towards, so it's a level playing field for everybody. Like I say, the guys at MCS, I'm sure they work very hard. So this is not, I'm not digging at them individually, but as a collective, we need to get together on it. Manufacturers, MCS, and the installer network, do not disrespect the installer network. We are the ones that are doing it. We can do it without anything else. The only reason why we need MCS and other schemes is to stimulate the growth of this industry. We really don't need restrictions. That's what we don't need. We need encouragement and help to train our engineers. We know what we want to achieve. We know the standards we want to achieve, and we just need support with it. We don't need restricting. And unfortunately, as it stands, it's quite restrictive. For installers like myself and many other installers that I talk to regularly, as it stands, it doesn't help us in any way. It just hinders us. It slows down the rollout of heat pumps, period. And it doesn't increase the standard of installation at all, as it stands. And like I say, I'm pro something. I'm pro MCS. I'm pro a standard to work towards. So I think it doesn't just need adjusting. It needs starting again. And I think what I would love to see from MCS is assistance in training for the next generation of engineers, to support us guys that are a little bit older and the generation above me in training engineers. That's what we need. Helping upskilling people, not restriction. The current access from a practical point of view, from a qualification point of view, the current training courses that there are that you've got to pass to be MCS registered to install heat pumps, I could probably complete all of the assessments in 20 minutes. Literally. They're a multiple choice answer, and I could just bosh through them rapidly, and it'd be just scratching the surface of what you need to be able to deliver a proper heat pump system. So just because you've got that and you're MCS registered, sadly, it means nothing. It means nothing as it stands, and it should mean something. There should be that prestige to it, but there isn't. So, and like I keep saying, I know the guys at MCS, I'm sure they're working hard, but it really needs to, we need to go again with it. We do, because it's holding up installations, sadly, because we're alienating really good installers as it stands. So that's my take on that. Other factors that slow down the rollout of heat pumps, the planning restrictions, the meter from the boundary rule, the size of the heat pump, the over 0.6 of a cubic metre is restrictive. But again, I'm not anti-planning permission. I'm not anti-control on that, because sadly there are unscrupulous installers that will take the piss if we remove those restrictions. Most of us will use common sense. Most of us will be like, putting it right next door to that neighbour's conservatory is taking the mick, and that's not fair. We'll look for a better location. So I get why there is the meter rule, but sadly, when it comes to terrace houses, the meter rule, which essentially, for those that you don't know, putting a heat pump closer than a meter to the property boundary, you've got to get planning permission. So if you imagine a terrace, the rear of the average terrace house is like 3.8 metres, something like that. And obviously you've at least one door in the back of the house. So by the time you come to trying to keep the heat pump a metre from the boundary, especially with low GWP natural refrigerants, where there's a restrictive zone we've got to adhere to, it makes it very difficult. And more often than not, we've got to get planning permission just to install a heat pump. So that is restrictive, but I don't know how we can deal with it, because I'm on the fence with it. Again, pardon the pun. I don't want it to be like the Wild West where people can just bang them in where they want. I think there needs to be some sort of control, but as it stands, it makes it very difficult to decarbonise homes from that point of view. Another restricting factor is the district network operators, and I've got a really good relationship with Electricity North West, which is the area that I operate in mainly, and we do work well together. But I find that outside our area, we struggle. I know the government has put pressure on district network operators. When we first started, we used to put an application in for a big single phase unit, like a 14-15 kilowatt single phase unit, and they'd give us quotes to upgrade transformers for like £40,000, and it was just a non-starter. Whereas the government I think they have put pressure on them to say, look, you've got to upgrade your network. So that's helped, but the process again can tie us up a bit, especially if we're putting a couple of heat pumps on. And don't get me wrong, it's important, if we don't apply to the DNO, the district network operator, to install heat pumps, and we start blowing up transformers, that's not right either. We've got to be safe and compliant, but we need to meet in the middle. And like I say, Electricity North West, we do really well with them. They're a good bunch. I know them quite well, and they do keep it moving. But that is a restricting factor. It is. Yeah. So in this next little section of the video, I'm going to show you our new training centre over in North Shields, which is part of what Global Energy are doing to help the rollout of heat pumps. We really do try and support our installers as much as possible.
a lot of our installer network over the years have done their first heat pump through us, or several heat pumps through us through our umbrella scheme. They'll have never installed a heat pump before, and they'll get the first one or two done, and then often progress into getting their own MCS registration and be a fully fledged heat pump installer. And what we've always tried to do is provide that initial training. And like I say, and like I have said in the video, it is product training. It's about us as a company, the basics of heat pumps, the do's and don'ts, heat loss calculations, wiring them up, getting them going, the commissioning, and we sort of train the guys on how to dip the toe in the water. And I always say this training that we do is that step one, but you must do self-learning yourselves. You must invest in yourself and learn that thoroughly the ins and outs of heat pumps and hydronic design as well. And there's other companies that do a really good job of that. You've got your Heat Geek and those types of courses, and there are others that are well worth doing. But yeah, we've always provided free training as a manufacturer, as much or as little as you want. Like we say, we do the introductory training, but we're almost there. I always say almost like we're stood behind you when you're doing your first job, as best as possible, especially with the EcoLink that we have. And what that is a remote monitoring system. Like all manufacturers now have a remote monitoring system, but we first developed ours on our first prototype units. So when we started sending prototype units out into the field, we put data loggers on them, just literally to see how they were working. We'd put them all around the country, in the top of Scotland, down south, east coast, west coast, give the most extreme weather we could. We'd put data loggers on the units, and we'd gather that data, and then we used to go and pick up the SD card out of them every month. And we very quickly got bored of that, so we thought let's get some remote system on. So we initially started out with like a basic laptop in there that was connected to the home's internet, and then we could literally pull a CSV file off, and we could scan through it and scroll through and see the flow and return temps and the gas temps and the refrigeration pressures. We saw the value in it pretty sharpish. So we managed to package it up into every heat pump we do. The slight difference to the EcoLink to what most manufacturers do is ours is actively monitored. So when we get that file back every day, so every morning we get a full email dump of data back from every heat pump we've got in the field, and then we basically scan the file and look for abnormalities within there, and it'll flag up an issue for bodies to actually dive in, like actual humans to look into it, scroll through the data, see where the issues are, and then actively try and sort them out. Now, how that helps the heat pump rollout is it gives the consumers confidence, because they know that there's somebody or something looking at their unit day in, day out to check its performance. But from my point of view, from an installation point of view, is when an installer's turning on their first unit, we can dial into the unit, check the parameters are set right, run pumps, run zone valve, 3-port valve, diverter valve, send it one way, send it the other, and the guy that's in the field can actually see that happening in front of their eyes and have the confidence that we are literally there on their shoulders to support them. Because it is a daunting thing when you first enter into your first heat pump install, because it's new to you. You want to know that you've got that support from the manufacturer. So that's one way we really support. But the other one is that free training, as I've just said. And like I say, we've got four training locations around the UK, and it is free, that initial training. So if anyone's interested, do come along. The next section of the video is also we'll introduce James, our new installer. He's only 23, and he's a little bit camera shy, so he's a man of few words. but I will introduce you to him as I go over to Ignite Gas Training in the Northeast, and just show you the rig there. It's a bit of a brief little section to the video, but that is where I wanted to talk about my first boss, Barry, because it's a similar situation, us passing on the knowledge to the next generation, and how important it is for us to have those mentors in the industry. Barry took me. Barry was actually my second boss. I know I said he was my first boss, but my first boss was not the nicest person, so I didn't last very long with him. But that's by the by. Barry picked me up from that point, and really developed me into the man I am today, is the only way to describe it. And like I say, this month, the 23rd, was the anniversary of his death, and like I say, he taught me so much about everything in life, and we spent many years together. And then he retired, and I essentially took on his customer base, and I used to visit him every year at Christmas. I'd go, we'd have a pint in the pub and whatnot, and then at his funeral, I had the honour of taking him on his last journey and whatnot. And the reason why I'm talking about him in this video is because without engineers like that passing on their knowledge and being supported in passing on their knowledge, we'll get nowhere. There is no college course or online learning that can replicate years of experience being passed on. I literally spent my full 4 years of apprenticeship with Barry, and then a further 3 years after that out in the field, and even after those 8 years, I was still miles away from being a rounded engineer. But then I've been able to pass that information, that knowledge on to the next generation. I've had a couple of apprentices that now run their own businesses, and they've employed apprentices. But as it stands, it is it's challenging, because the college courses that are out there, sadly, are quite poor, and the support that the next generation are getting is poor. And that is where, and I know it's not MCS's job. It's not MCS's job to provide training. They're a standard. But at the end of the day, we're paying money to them. So us as installers should be able to ask for help. And I think that us all getting together as installers, MCS, and the government, we really need to invest in the next generation. And the way we're going to do that is by supporting people of my generation, the generation above, getting involved with heat pumps, not restricting them, and bringing the next generation along. It's the only way to achieve it. You will not train engineers overnight. It's impossible. I don't care what anybody says. But I am pro technology, and I always say this when I'm doing training. It is great to learn the maths behind heating. But what we have got now, and I always say this, there's an app for everything. And there's AI, etc., etc. And I embrace that 100%. The apps that are being developed at the minute, and I'm not going to name any, but I have friends and colleagues that are working in that sector, developing applications to make our life easier as a heating engineer. I think you should still know the maths behind it, basically, but you don't need to anymore. You can literally get a pipe sizing app, you can get a heat loss app that you can scan rooms and it'll produce full heat loss calculations and pipe sizing layouts. So that's not got to be ignored. That side of it, I think, within 18 months will be nailed on. Almost like the courses that I mentioned earlier. Will they be obsolete? Possibly, with the technology. But what will never be obsolete is that field knowledge from the older generation to my generation to the next generation. We cannot lose that. We cannot lose that. So this skills gap when it comes to the mathematics, etc., can be overcome with AI and apps. But the practical knowledge, being able to sniff out a problem, can only be built with experience. So I've bored you enough in this video, so I'll just quickly drop in the me turning up at Ignite Gas training, and then I'll do a little summary at the end. Hello, I've just arrived at Ignite training. It wasn't too bad a journey over, and I'm looking at our new training rig here, which is looking fantastic. I just want to introduce you to a new engineer we've got on board, James, 23-year-old lad, and he's doing a sterling job. He's done all this setup, this training rig setup, and bear in mind it is a training rig, so everything's clumped together in one area, and he's done the full install in a day, so he's done a great job. So this is it. I know I've been showing you a few little clips of it. We've got a 6 kilowatt heat pump, 200 litre cylinder with an integrated 50 litre volumizer. We've got the Belimo valve kit on there and radiator. So it's a nice little training rig. I'll be running monthly training sessions here, and we're going to be doing more of an introduction to heat pumps. It's going to be product training, introduction to MCS, heat loss calculations, that kind of thing. So if you are a heat pump installer and you've been doing it for years, maybe not for you, but if you are interested in seeing the Global Energy Kit, come along. But it's not in depth per se, it is that introduction. So yeah, I'm going to introduce you to James in a second and let him talk about this rig. So we've got James here, our new engineer, 23-year-old lad. How's it going?
I'm all right.
Oh, good. So I always say you can judge an engineer by his tools. You know, there's those guys that buy awesome tools and don't know how to use them. James does know how to use them, but he's got the full Vito bag set up, and you guys that know tools, you know how expensive they are and whatnot. So James, how's it going?
Good.
How did you like doing this first little rig?
So it's been a little bit of a challenge, but other than that, it's obviously cramming everything into one space because there's other equipment here.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's not been too bad.
Like we were saying before, on a training rig, obviously we've got the heat pump, the cylinder and the radiator all in one corner. So when guys come in for training, they always say, oh crikey, it looks like there's a lot of equipment. Of course there is, but the reality is the heat pump itself will be outside, cylinder will be in a cylinder cupboard or in a loft space, and then your radiator spread throughout the house. But I really like the way that James approaches an install. His attention to detail is great. Drain offs where they need to be, clipping really well spaced out. So yeah, really good job, mate. I've just arrived home. Time's 7:15. It's been a long old day, but a productive one. The guys at Ignite Gas training in the northeast, North Shields, should I say? So yeah, so just east of Newcastle. You've got to get North Shields and South Shields right, otherwise you get in trouble. But yeah, what a team! Those guys are awesome. Really keen to you know, stretch the boundaries of training in the gas. You know, from my background, the gas industry. So it's great to see that, but also push into renewables. And obviously with our new setup there and the courses that they run, along with the courses that we run, hopefully we can develop a good relationship there. But yeah, it was great to get James on. And as I said at the start of the video when I was talking about my first boss, and how much I learned off him,
It's what it's all about, passing on that knowledge, sharing knowledge as well. We all learn every day. Yeah, I learn something every day. And over the years, the 24 years I've been doing heating, I've developed every single year, and hopefully I'll continue to do so. So yeah, we'll be running those training courses probably every month in conjunction with, and obviously that what I try to do is give that break down the boundaries. If you've never done a heat pump before, and you're a gas engineer, a heating engineer, and you want to crack that first heat pump, I'll sort of dispel the myths, hopefully give you a good overview of the refrigeration side, introduction to MCS. We'll do the do's and don'ts of heat pumps and heat pump design and whatnot. So yeah, it's good for dipping your toe into the heat pump industry. So everyone's welcome to come. Homeowners are welcome to come as well. You know, it's not just for installers. If people are interested in getting a heat pump, you can come along and sit and listen to the questions. It's a morning. It's basically just a morning. You turn up at 9 o'clock and you're away for 1 o'clock. But what I find is there's a framework to this introductory training, but the conversation that we have leads the way. You know, we might have a few electrical engineers, a few installers, the odd homeowner, and there might be a seasoned installer that's been in it for a long time, and the questions come up, and it really drives the course, and we get good feedback, you know, which is positive. So yeah, everyone's welcome to come along. Just I'll put my email address below, so you guys can, you know, if you've got any questions, just fire them at me. And also, if you want to book on the training course, you can do that through my email address. I'll put my email address down so you can fire questions at me, but I'll put one of Global's email addresses down for the training. And I'll also link James's Instagram, because he's hot on his Instagram, and he's got a lot of his installation work that he's done. And stick that in there. So yeah, thank you very much. Please, I promised myself I'd never say this, but please do like and subscribe, because it helps spread the word and grow the community. And also, just a final thought, I really appreciate over the last 5 days the messages of support of people from our industry, real top end installers, ex-colleagues. Pretty much every major manufacturer, I've had somebody contact me this week just to say well done on what I'm doing, and yeah, so really appreciate the support. Yeah, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.